Hello everyone and welcome to video number 7 in our Weather Unlocked series, Doppler Radar Fundamentals, Part 1. My name is Jordan Didio and I'm a meteorologist here at NWS Springfield, Missouri. In this video, we'll be covering how radars came to be used in the National Weather Service, a step-by-step procedure of how weather radars work, how these radars have evolved over the years, and the limitations meteorologists face when using radar. Let's start with a quick look at the history behind weather radars. While radar had been used by the US military to detect nearby aircraft following World War I, they didn't start to be widely used for weather purposes until the 1940s. It all started when military radar operators noticed strange signals being returned to the radar when pilots were flying into areas of heavy weather. Scientists were intrigued by these signals and began researching how they could be used to better understand the weather. Then, in 1942, the U.S. Navy donated 25 of their surplus radars to the National Weather Service, then known as the Weather Bureau, where meteorologists began using them specifically for weather-related purposes. In 1959, the Weather Service began rolling out its first network of weather surveillance radars, or WSRs, dedicated to a national warning network. The network underwent multiple iterations and improvements in the following decades, steadily improving their accuracy and reliability. And then in 1992, the Next Generation Radar Systems, or NEXTRAD, were deployed operationally, which included the addition of Doppler velocities, allowing forecasters to measure wind speed, direction, and rotation in thunderstorms. Today, the NEXTRAD system is being used in nearly 150 locations across the country. Now that we know a little bit about weather radar's history, let's dive into how they actually work. Here's a step-by-step process. First, the radar sends out a quick burst of radio wave energy, called a pulse, toward its target. This target can be anything really, but for weather purposes, we're talking about raindrops, hailstones, snowflakes, and so on. Once the pulse hits its target, energy is scattered in all directions, some of which goes back toward the radar. This backscattered energy is often referred to as an echo. While this is going on, the radar is simply waiting or listening until the echo is returned back to it with information on the size, shape, location, and movement of the target. Finally, once the echo is received, the data are sent to a computer system that processes the signal. This information is used to generate the imagery meteorologists use in forecasting, like the ones you see on TV or on your smartphone app. This whole process is then repeated as the radar turns and makes a complete 360-degree sweep. They also change the angle at which they send out pulses, allowing the radar to sample multiple elevations in the atmosphere as well. Now, I had previously mentioned in step 3 that the radar simply waits for an echo to return back to it. But did you know that radars spend the vast amount of their time listening rather than transmitting? In fact, if you were to add up all the time in 1 hour that the radar was actually transmitting a pulse, you'd find that it only comes to about 7 seconds. The remaining 59 minutes and 53 seconds, the radar is just listening for echoes. Now, if you're a fellow weather enthusiast, you may have heard the term dual-polarization, or dual-pol, thrown around from time to time. But what exactly is dual-polarization? Simply put, it allows the radar to measure in both the horizontal and the vertical. Prior to the upgrade, the WSR-88Ds could only transmit and receive radiation that was oriented horizontally. This limited the scope and detail we could get from single polarization radar. However, in the early 2010s, the National Weather Service began upgrading their radars to include dual-pol technology. This upgrade greatly expanded the information and products that Doppler radars were able to provide. For example, meteorologists were then able to accurately identify the shape and size of rain, hail, and snow, the rain-to-snow transition line, a tornado debris signature, or TDS, and much more. We'll take a deeper look at the products Dual-Pol provides in our next video, so stay tuned. Alright, so radar is great. We as meteorologists would practically be blind without it. But with every piece of technology comes a slew of quirks and challenges along with it, and radar is no exception. Let's go over just a few of radar's limitations here. We'll start with beam spreading. A conical-shaped beam is formed as the pulse moves away from the radar. As the beam spreads, the resolution is degraded farther from the radar. This can cause the radar to smooth out smaller scale details in the atmosphere. Next, we have the issue of overshooting. As the beam moves away from the radar, it typically measures a higher elevation in the atmosphere. This can cause the radar to overshoot details at lower elevations, which can especially be a problem when looking at severe thunderstorms. Finally, there's refraction. Refraction is simply when light or radiation is bent as it passes through mediums with different densities. Therefore, since the density of the atmosphere is not the same everywhere, this can cause the radar beam to be bent in several ways. Subrefraction is when the decrease in air density with height is more than normal, causing the radar beam to bend less than normal. Superrefraction, on the other hand, is when the decrease in air density with height is less than normal, then the beam bends more than normal. An extreme case of superrefraction is called ducting. Ducting is when the beam bends more than the Earth's curvature. And as a result, the beam will eventually be bent into the ground. This can cause some very unusual signals to be turned to the radar. There are many more things to keep in mind when looking at radar products, but fortunately, meteorologists are trained to know the limitations, how to get around them, and how to spot when something just doesn't look right. And with that, that concludes part 1 of our Doppler radar fundamentals video. In part 2, we'll take a more in-depth look at the products that Doppler radars provide and go through several examples of what these products are showing. Thank you for listening, and we hope you look forward to our next video.